Hello everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Creating Scalable Consumer Products and Services in the Internet of Things Era. My name is Michael Wolf. I'll be your host and moderator today. And I'm really excited to have two great panelists and guests with me, Mike Harris, the CEO of Zonoff, as well as Kevin Meagher, the General Manager of the Lowe Smart Home Group. We'll get into more detailed introductions in just a moment, but before we do that, I wanted to quickly go over today's agenda to give you an idea of what we'll be talking about today. Very quickly, we'll give an introduction to NextMarket Insights and what we do here, just to give you a quick idea. And then we'll give introductions into our hosts and our panelists today. And then we'll have 4 chapters of conversation, basically going over and slicing apart today's topic in a few different ways. And then at the end, I hope to have some time for questions and answers. If you look at your webinar panel, you'll see that there is an Ask a Question button at the very top in the left-hand corner. So if you do have some questions that you want us to go over, if you want Mike and Kevin or myself to answer, please feel free during the course of the webinar to submit a question. I have gotten some questions in advance of today's webinar, so I do have some questions. If we're having a fairly sluggish or sleepy group today, I do have some questions that some folks did submit in advance, so I thank you folks for that. Let's get on and very quickly introduce you to NextMarket Insights and then introduce you to our panelists. At NextMarket Insights, what we do here, we're a research and advisor firm focused on consumer Internet of Things and smart home topics. We are a full-service market research company providing advisory, surveys, research, and turnkey event and webinar editorial services to some of the largest companies in the world. We have 15 years of in-house experience advising product and service strategies for companies like Cisco, Samsung, Microsoft, HP, Philips, AT&T, Verizon, and more. And you can always learn more about us at nextmarket.co. Let's introduce you to our panelists. I'm super excited to have Mike Harris, a guy I've gotten to know a little bit, who's I always think is one of the savviest guys in the space. He is the CEO of Zonoff. And Mike, very quickly introduce yourself and what Zonoff does.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, so I'm Mike Harris, again, CEO. I'm one of the founders of Zonoff. Zonoff's a software platform company, not one of the lesser-known companies in the space because we operate behind the scenes. We build solutions for the smart home for big retailers, service providers, device makers, and then leverage our channel partners to take the product to market. They've established relationships with the consumer, have trusted brands, and so through that, that's how we deliver our technology to the consumer. Yeah, that smart home platform is a combination of embedded software that runs inside the house to manage the communication to all the connected devices. It's a cloud service component that does both consumer-facing technology as well as channel-facing features. And then we supply applications as well, whether that's iOS, that's Android, Microsoft operating systems, web UIs, kind of the full gamut. Best known for the Staples Connect platform. That's in the retail channel. We built and managed that platform for Staples. So that's a quick view of Zonoff.
Thanks, Mike. We also have Kevin Meagher with us today. Kevin is the General Manager of Lowe's Smart Home Group. Kevin, can you give us a little bit of idea of your background and also what you're doing at Lowe's?
Yeah, hi Mike. Thanks for having us join today. Yeah, I've been recruited by Lowe's. I've been working for Lowe's for 3 years now. We identified some time back that the world was changing. The IoT, the Internet of Things, was going to reinvent the way things worked in the future, and we, Lowe's, needed to be cognizant of what that meant for our business. We decided that there was a huge opportunity with this new emerging market around connected devices. So we've created a new category in our store called the connected home. And in that space, we sell all the types of things that consumers will come to expect from a smart home: connected door locks, connected security systems, cameras, lighting, and so forth. We're bundling more and more. Our great advantage in the market is we sell stuff, and we are working with all our vendors to connect everything. So literally water heaters, water shut-off valves, all of those are things that we've either got already in the marketplace or will come to market before the end of the year. And we're simply expanding that category and that range of devices. So like Mike, we have a cloud platform. We use that cloud platform to support all the devices. Our mission is to give our customers one thing they struggle to find elsewhere, which is a single application and a single user interface through which they can monitor and control everything they buy from Lowe's.
Thank you, Kevin. Let's get on with the conversation. Our first chapter today is really trying to understand what's different today in this emerging era of Internet of Things around the experience of products, consumer products in particular, as around the sale. So I want to talk about that with Kevin and Mike. And I'll direct this first question at you, Kevin. When you look at anticipating how you sell products that are connected, that are smart, I would imagine that the sale over time is going to change. It's potentially a different sale. Can you talk about that?
Well, it's a particular challenge for us, Lowe's. We typically haven't sold connected stuff in the past, so there's a technical challenge. What we've done is we've focused very hard on trying to make connectivity simple. So devices we take to store, try to make them simple, try to make them affordable, and try to give comfort to customers who are interested in entering this space that what we're bringing them is scalable. They're not buying into something that that next week will disappear off the market. So we've had to do a lot of work around that. What we see is that in the future, the connectivity of devices these devices generate data. And in truth, it's that data that's where the huge value lies. It lies there because we can turn that data into services that we deliver back to the consumer, which enhances the relationship we have with the consumer, allows us to offer a lot more value with the products, and of course to link it across to other things that we might sell that will be of real interest to that consumer. So really it's moving from where we are today in a market that's largely product-centric. People walk into a store, pick something up, what they feel and touch is what they get, to a future where they'll walk into the store, they'll look at something, they'll be as interested, if not more interested, in the service component and how this new product, this new device will fit into a wider ecosystem, and that's pretty game-changing.
Yeah, and I expect that, when you look at the product that you're selling, and going from something that largely was not connected, that you would sell and oftentimes wouldn't hear about or hear from the customer before, to something that is becoming a product that is a platform in a sense. I think you mentioned that, and there's services built around that. And so, Mike Harris, I'd love to hear, when you're talking, for example, to Staples, and they're thinking about selling something, do you tell them that this is essentially what you're selling them as a platform for services, or talk about that conversation a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, when we engage with our customers, the channel partners, we see a pretty broad range. I mean, obviously there's some folks that just want to get into the market. It's such a hot space. Everybody's talking about it. To kind of the other end of the extreme was Staples when we first engaged with them a few years ago, which actually was very forward-looking. They had a great visibility of what they wanted to do. And it wasn't described so much as a platform as much as it was a way to make it easy for their consumers. Now that's what they're all about, right? Easy button and all of that. It was taking the complexity of having a bunch of kind of siloed devices and bringing it together into a single experience, and then through that experience creating a long-term relationship between Staples and that consumer, so that now if they had problems, if they had questions, if they wanted to add new services or add new products to their home or small office, they could go do that in one way, in a really seamless way. So it was less around the platform and more around the experience of what they were trying to go accomplish, from a business perspective. We're seeing it taking a path very similarly to what happened in the traditional consumer electronics market, which is really where my background is. And when TVs, Blu-ray players and such really went and became connected, and it wasn't because consumers were driving to the store and saying, hey, I really need a connected TV today. They were buying the TV. The TV happened to be connected, had other features, and oftentimes they discovered the value of that connectivity after the fact as opposed to driving it to them. That really separates the mass market from the early adopter and the enthusiast space. And so for us, we're really in that transition point right now to the mass market, which is obviously what's serviced by Lowe's, what's serviced by Staples, and some of our other customers.
Mike, you mentioned the TV, and we've seen that transition over the past 5 years as TV manufacturers have moved from shipping glass to making these things smart. And when you make something like a smart TV, at least the ideal on paper is that you become essentially someone who has a service platform, et cetera. But there's real challenges. When you look at the TV market, for example, there's been challenges around that. I don't think it's certainly been like something that I think even the likes of Samsung and LG would say is, they've had challenges with, for example, getting people to connect. So I think there are challenges within the smart home space in this industry making this transition. So either one of you guys, what are some of the biggest challenges you see as we make this transition into this new era, if you're a product company, if you're a retailer?
If I could perhaps have first stab at that, I think the big challenge, as Mike alluded to, is the market today. There's a general lack of awareness. The market today is not really where we want to be. What we've got, I don't think it's where the market needs to be, where we have siloed devices, where you've got what we consider point-to-point solutions. So customer goes, buys a device, buys a connected device, thinks it's cool if I can control my thermostat remotely. But then over time realizes, well, my thermostat won't work with anything else. And really the value of connectivity is not being able to connect just to one device. It's the value of the Internet of Things, and connectivity will come from all these devices being connected and talking to each other. And customers being able to cherry pick what they want connected and have them all work in a way that meets their particular needs. The big issue is just getting the value propositions right. At the end of the day, the customer is always right. If the customer buys it, you've got it right. If they don't, you need to go back to the drawing board. And I think the biggest challenge is raising awareness and making them aware of what the value of some of this technology. The fact that actually these days it is simple, it's affordable. This isn't the home of the Jetsons anymore. It's there, it's on a shelf, you can buy it. And then our experience has been once they buy it, once they get into it, once they use it, then actually it's a bit like if your smartphone packs in, you're straight back out to get another one because your lifestyle depends on it, and you feel uncomfortable without it. So those are the challenges. It's moving consumers away from where they are today, where they ask the question, why do I need to bother, to the point where they actually, when they're buying a product, wouldn't contemplate buying something that wasn't connected.
So from what I'm hearing from Kevin, Mike, is that the biggest challenge is raising awareness, but also that there is, at least today, some level of fragmentation or balkanization. And this is a well-discussed topic, obviously, in the broader Internet of Things. So how would you respond to that, or some other things that you see as potential challenges to get this as we move into this new era?
Well, there's absolutely a consumer awareness problem, so of that I think everybody agrees, and how that goes and gets solved, is it just purely by advertising, is word of mouth? All of those things are answers to it, and that takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of time. I'll look at it a little bit on the other side. Obviously there's the fragmentation, but one of the things that not a lot of people talk about is the fundamental business challenges around people participating in this market and business models specifically. As we just talked about, this is very true in the TV space, and it's now true with all these other connected devices. Is now I've got a device that goes into a home that very realistically has a 3 to 5 to 10 to 20 year lifespan in that consumer's home, and the product isn't just an end product that once you ship it, once it gets into the retail shelves, it's gone. The people that are supplying it, particularly if they're direct connected to the internet products with Wi-Fi in it, now they're service providers. And having a business model that supports that and pays for the cost that's involved in providing that service, is a tough one. Early, in this market 5 years ago and so on, people launched platforms, people launched devices, and looked to charge, $5 a month, $10 a month to provide that service. That never even happened in the consumer electronics space. I mean, all those services were free right away, and those big companies were looking for ways to monetize that, whether that's through commissions, through movie rentals, and so on. I think that's the big shift and the big awareness that is just starting to arrive into the device maker space, is that, my traditional margins that pay for this hardware device, are not going to pay for providing 15 years of service for my garage door opener, for my light switch, and so on. And so that's where, we've been excited to bring, some of our other participants, whether it's service providers or retailers, to the game, because they have a more sustainable model. I think that, as Kevin said, Lowe's is in the business of selling stuff, as is Staples and other retailers. Providing that service has value because you're driving consumers back to the store, either online or in brick and mortar, to drive incremental sales, and that's a really crucial opportunity. And then ultimately you'll see more and more services being added on there as well. But for me, coming up with sustainable business models, because there are a lot of people out there that don't have those right now, and I worry that those companies disappearing are going to lead to frustrated consumers out there, and it's going to lead the whole industry with a black eye.
Yeah, you make a good point about companies disappearing. Just this week, very timely news alluding to that, or last week, Revolve was acquired by Google, and they're basically stopping shipping that product. And so there's a little bit of worry over time as the carcasses pile up. And in any new market, we've had this conversation before, in any new market you see that happen. But Mike, you started to bring up this idea of transitioning to a service-based relationship. And so, I want to talk about that. That's a nice segue, because when you look at the Internet of Things area, some people would postulate that we're all service providers, but I would think that it's a matter of context, right? So, are you a service provider at Lowe's? Are you selling product, but you're also a service provider over time? Are you a service provider if you're just making hardware and selling it over Kickstarter? So, Kevin, what do you think? Do you view yourself as a service provider now versus just someone who's selling point-of-sale product?
I think the two things, the Internet of Things is going to will make the two things indiscernible. As I mentioned earlier, people, when they buy something in the future, will be looking at the broader value proposition, which is this service overlay. And the definition of a service is something perhaps we should spend a second on. Because traditionally we think of service providers as the cable cos managing huge infrastructure behind the back end that keeps your phone working or delivers entertainment to your home. This is going to be a slightly different layer. If you imagine an app as a service, maintaining that app, when you press that button on a user interface, somebody's running a bunch of servers in the background, and making the rules and the various bits and pieces and the features of that device work. And absolutely Lowe's believe that we need to do that. We need to do it for the reason that you started to see in the market. People can trust Lowe's. At the end of the day, we're a brand. We believe that customers will, the problem for customers will be when they buy multiple devices with multiple different apps. The value proposition is limited. Moreover, they're going to get very unhappy when they buy a particular device with a particular app and then find a year and a half, 2 years downstream, a company taken over, just decide to stop doing it because they've made their margin on the product sale and they're no longer supporting it, and so on and so on. And so we're just anticipating those problems, stepping up to the base, as it were, and providing a solution from a brand and a name that we think they can trust, and focused very much on the thing that matters to us, which is your home. So we kind of see all these problems coming. We just don't want to go there. So we do believe, absolutely, we are now a service provider, but not in the sense that you would consider traditional service providers like telcos and cable cos. It's a different definition.
You're not rolling trucks.
well, interesting. There's a point. Actually, we roll trucks. You want your washing machine and dishwasher installed.
Right.
Trucks. We actually have a whole bunch of services. We actually have been a service provider since the day retail started. When you walk into our store and you want somebody to fit something for you, we can solve that problem. So in that sense, we've always been providing a service. So this is nothing more than a slight variation on that theme.
There's a piece, there's an article by the guest columnist whose name is slipping my mind today in Recode, basically talking about HomeKit and how he was postulating and stating that he felt like there needed to be a couple companies that rose up and were acting as the hubs around Internet of Things and smart home to basically reduce the fragmentation. And getting to this point on the slide, many devices, many service providers, that's a real issue. Is there a master service provider to kind of manage all of these things when you consider products bought from Lowe's, when I consider wearables I bring into my house and my car? Mike, have you given thought to this? I mean, do we ultimately need kind of an oligopoly in a sense over time, or can we get there where can we get to the point where everything works together? You don't need a kind of a master service provider from a market perspective to make all this stuff work together.
I think by sticking to some of the well-known standards and some of the established pieces there, I think you do get to a level of interoperability that is good for the industry in general. I know today if you go into Lowe's and buy products at Lowe's and bring it home and try and run it on your Staples Connect system, it'll work. Vice versa, if you go into Staples and take it to Lowe's, I don't know. Kevin can tell you whether it'll work. I think most of them will. I think that, but clearly the goal is to make it so that works, so that the consumer can go and pick what platform works for them. Now, what I see as it overall, kind of grows in the market is there's a lot of different systems inside the home. There's lighting, there's, HVAC and so on. There's, as you said, wearables and cars and entertainment. I think it's not unrealistic to expect a couple of systems inside people's homes in the near term, as opposed to one master system that controls everything. I think everybody's goal is to get there to be able to at least offer a solution into the consumer that will control everything. But ultimately, there are so many people who have their own agenda and what they're trying to achieve, whether it's Apple or Google or others, that will really try to make an effort to be that key service provider, that key gatekeeper into the consumer. And so then it's going to be up to consumer choice of who do they trust to go be that provider for them in the long term that can bring the level of innovation that they're interested in.
We talk a little bit about this idea of transitioning business models. I think, Mike, you talked about it a little bit on the kind of last slide. Kevin, you've talked about how you are a bit of a service provider. So getting kind of down to brass tacks on that, when you think about the very nature of supporting a customer over a 5 to 10 year window, Kevin, I'd be interested to hear how you think about how your business model changes. I know with the Lowe's Iris, you have a subscription tier. So, do you think that there needs to be kind of an ongoing form of recurring revenue from a business model perspective to support customers as devices transition from becoming dumb to smart, non-connected to connected?
I think in the long term, actually I don't. I think that the bulk of services provided to consumers as part of these types of propositions will be free. The bulk of services that we provide to customers today, we have a free entry level. There is no way in the future you can put a product, I don't believe, a product on a retail shelf at $200 or $300 or even less, and actually the use is conditional on paying on committing to a paid subscription fee, or otherwise the device just doesn't work. I think there are value propositions that consumers would want that, to be frank, cost money, and service levels that cost money. We're fortunate as a retailer in the sense that if you buy your products from us, well, thank you for your custom, we've made margin. supporting that product and having you connected to us is, again, it's a sensible business model because I've got a relationship with you. That relationship is worth something to me. We can communicate. We can offer you other things. We can hope you come back into store for other stuff. And therefore, there's a value to that relationship. And therefore, me maintaining that service is, to call it marketing is to do it a disservice because we don't want it to be that. We don't want to be marketing to you every minute of the day, quite the reverse. But we do see that having that relationship, having that tie-in brings many, many benefits, we think, to both the consumer and to us. The consumer gets value from it because we give them this service for free because that's what we get in return. But there are, and it will be interesting to see how this plays out over time. Today, there are certain services that absolutely would give you would qualify for a service premium. It will get more and more challenging over time to do that. But I do think that there's some years left in this market, and we just have to be very discerning about what we think the value propositions are. But in reality, customers will choose. And if I give you an example of how crazy the choices can be sometimes, nobody believed that ringtones would be $1 billion industry, but it was. And there's no telling what we might do in this new connected world to layer in things that consumers would go, well, that's just great. I love that, and I'll pay either a flat fee for having that capability and functionality delivered or some small slice of recurring revenue. Who knows? What I think is beholden to all of us to do is to go in with an open mind and just put the framework in place to allow us to go in any of these directions.
Does the transition from what is essentially positioned as a premium service that would be subscription-based to something that is now free, part of a bundle that is stuff for free, I would imagine that's largely driven by competition, by software revs around software frameworks. For example, if Apple starts to create amazing free functionality in HomeKit and allows things to get better over time, that drives what you guys do. I mean, not to focus in on Apple, but I would imagine that this is just kind of the natural evolution over time of what's premium today versus what eventually will be table stakes and kind of core functionality tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll dive in there. I think that's absolutely the case. We're already seeing that just in the last 5 years. Folks that were charging for something $10 a month is now across the industry assumed to be free. I agree with Kevin. Consumers will pay if there's value, and they find value. That's been proven over and over again. But you'll continually find folks that will try and disrupt that, whether it's a lower price or no price, and using alternative methods to fund it. Funding it purely by venture money isn't sustainable, but there are lots of interesting models that are out there. Nobody's really explored advertising that too much. People tease about Nest starting to throw ads up on their thermostat because of the Google tie-in. But whether it's advertising, whether it's subsidizing the hardware, in a traditional cable model, where that's what's driving the fee, or other places like that. The same way the cable TV model is being disrupted by online video and being delivered in that way, whether it's a la carte or through free services, everybody's going to have to adapt. But we'll see a very interesting time over the next several years as people explore ways to go monetize it, whether it's a paid-for service or a la carte premium services, concierge services around support and installation, and even something like advertising.
Kevin, I have to say, it sounds like more of a headache potentially in some ways to become someone who has an ongoing service relationship with the customer. Maybe I'm not Lowe's, but are there downsides to becoming and changing your relationship with customers where, for the most part, in the long term, it becomes more of a kind of a long-term relationship and an ongoing relationship? Are there downsides to this?
Yeah, providing services is hard. But here's the interesting thing. We tend to think of, and it comes back to this definition of traditional service providers, We tend to forget that retail actually is a service provider today. There's a whole bunch of people deliberately buy stuff from retail, brick and mortar, rather than buy it online. And they buy it because they've got the peace of mind of walking down there, feeling it, touching it, kicking it, talking to somebody who knows what they're talking about, knowing that they can pick up the phone and talk to somebody if there's a problem with it, and their phone numbers are there for people to see, and customer service is appreciated. And I think Mike touched on it. You know, we've been a service provider since the business started. We're a different type of service provider. This technology brings new challenges, but it brings new benefits. It means that we're, you know, as connected appliances come along in number, we can provide levels of service, new levels of service over the top of traditional warranties. We can provide them at price points that will be much more interesting and exciting because we don't have to send a man round to diagnose problems and so on and so on. So actually, when you think about it, retail's always been a service provider. Retail is merely adapting to technology, taking advantage of technology, and the opportunity that creates to help what is their traditional business. And it's not so surprising that we would be all over this and keen to leverage it. I think the future it'll be interesting to see whether technology companies who come out with pure service plays will adapt to the challenge of retail quicker than retail companies like us and Staples adapt to the challenge of technology. And I'd put my money on Lowe's and Staples.
And that's an interesting conversation because I think the challenges for technology companies is distribution oftentimes and finding distribution, whereas that's your core competency. But oftentimes there is, as we've seen over time, retailers that go into technology oftentimes don't necessarily have the core expertise. Oftentimes it's a partnership model. So there's certainly a balancing act, and everyone's coming from their respective strengths. But this market's really probably too soon to tell, to see kind of what respective strength, what core strength is going to be the most important.
I think, Mike, you bring up a fabulous point there, and that is that we talk about how this business is reinventing, you know, the way we deal with customers and so on and so forth. Actually, it's changing the nature of partnerships, and we know that we've got to have a very different relationship with our vendors, the people who traditionally supply us. We've got to have a very different relationship with other companies, other industries, and we've got to have a very different relationship with technology partners. And so for this new world to work, I actually think the winners and the losers will be those that strike the best balance across that field and develop the best bunch of relationships. You know, and if you look at the type of thing, to give examples, we know that we need to share data with our vendors, because if we want them to make your machines better, they need to know how they're behaving in the field. And we do that openly. We share data with them, but we ask you if we can share the data. We all win. We know that insurance companies are keen to offer you discounts if you protect your home in different ways. And once again, you know, we've developed relationships with those guys and basically said, well, listen, you know, are you happy that your insurance company knows you've got this system and that you're using it? And if you are, they'll give you an insurance discount. And you're the customer. You make the decision as to whether we can tie that partner into this service bundle or not. And those are things that are happening right now, and it's going to happen in spades in the future. There's going to be a lot more of that.
I want to transition the conversation a little bit to talking about scaling and how that happens, because when you talk about getting to 1 million customers, it really, to me, having watched businesses do this, there are stresses on parts of the business that oftentimes are unanticipated. Success sounds great, but oftentimes it creates many problems. And oftentimes it can actually lead to failure of a business, being too successful if you're not prepared for it. And we see this all the time on crowdfunding campaigns. I mean, it's becoming well documented that's highly successful Kickstarter campaigns around devices oftentimes fail because they're more successful than they anticipated, and the money that they got was not enough. So, I want to ask you, I'll start with Mike, scaling to 1 million customers, how does this change a business, and what parts of the business oftentimes could become points of failure?
I think your point is a good one. I think there's a lot of folks that are entering this space that have never built a business that services millions of consumers. And as a result, they really dramatically underestimate what that takes. The number of crowd-funded campaigns I see that are clearly going to fail because they're promising things that physics don't allow, or are dramatically below cost, and they'll make it up in volume. I mean, it's rampant right now because obviously there's so much enthusiasm around it, and people want to believe. The first step is approaching it with a business model that actually scales itself, right? Where adding each customer doesn't cost you money; it actually makes you money. I think that just takes a very professional approach, and having people around the table that understand their business, that are going in and have a very pragmatic view on it. For us, I think that's why we focus with such trusted partners and the big names. I mean, our smallest customers are billion-dollar customers. They're not going to walk into something with just a blind faith that will make it up in volume. And so as a result, it's really built from the ground up to support those million customers, but knowing that there are challenges along the way. Now, in the Internet of Things space in general, smart homes specifically, there's, unlike pure web services, the scale doesn't happen overnight. You don't have the runaway wildfire type things like would happen with a viral campaign on some website. It is limited by the things. There are devices that people have to buy, that have to get manufactured, that have to go through the full supply chain. So there's a natural limiting factor, and as a result, my view is if with a very professional approach to it, with people who've been there and done that, it's a very manageable trend to go follow and build the scale as the market needs it. You just have to architect for success.
You make a great point. I mean, with hardware and things, there's not that elasticity that you find with the cloud. I mean, you could put in a call to Amazon and enter up your account with AWS, and there's a level of elasticity if your site goes viral. But when you look at the Internet of Things, there are real points of failure oftentimes around the hardware side. Kevin, I would imagine, clearly Lowe's knows how to move volume, knows how to move million-dollar bestsellers, but when you work with partners, oftentimes I would imagine, and I think there are some startups, some young kind of fresh faces that are part of your Lowe's Iris program. What are the things you're looking at to make sure that they are able to scale if all of a sudden their product took off?
Well, the thing we try to do is we love to find innovative new products and great new startups. And we found a bunch of them, and we're thrilled to be working with them. The first thing we say to them is, look, focus on your core strength. If you've got great innovation, a great idea, let's think about it. Let's look at what you've got. Wouldn't it be much better if actually I introduce you to, and this comes back to the point about partnerships. I partner with smaller technology companies, and the first thing I say to them is, don't try to make it. I've got a company over here that makes tons of stuff, and they ship it all over the world, and they make squillions of these things. Focus on what you're good at, which is the core technology and the software or whatever it is that you do, and license it to these guys to handle all that rubbish and handle the real challenge of scale, the real challenge of making sure you supply me to my data, to my distribution centers on a set date in a particular wagon with on a pallet of a certain size in a packaging that has been drop tested and blah blah blah, and let companies do what they do really well. Let technology companies, earlier technology companies, take this stuff, license it to the companies that have got brands, they've got distribution. They can deal with a company like Lowe's. They can handle the customer inquiries, and then let us take it and do what we do best, which is join it together with 10 other devices from similar companies to create an ecosystem. And as Mike highlighted earlier, let us all work to open standards. So guys, while you think it might be great and you think you're going to be the next Nest, open your APIs, open your standards up so it works on my platform, but it also works on Mike's. So I don't care if a customer buys something from me and connects it up to Mike's platform or vice versa, because you're the customer. You choose. If you prefer Mike's service, but you prefer my price point and my retail outlet, great, I've got something out of it. So it's trying to have that openness, trying to create that ecosystem, trying to encourage people to play by those types of rules.
You make some great points. And you talked about interoperating between different platforms, different systems. And that's one of the things that I often wonder about in this idea of Internet of Things. If things become so complex, you're talking about truly multi-vendor networks, in an era where there's, we haven't kind of gotten to resolution around standards. Does that have kind of a negative impact on scaling your product, basically being limited by the weakest link in the chain, essentially, in this Internet of Things? I mean, Mike, do you think that it's harder to scale because we're talking about something that is oftentimes reliant on other people's systems?
Yeah, it certainly causes concern relative to the consumer experience. A consumer buys products, they take them home, they set them all up. They don't know that, I'm talking to the light switches inside the house, but to talk to the garage door, I'm talking through the cloud. And that if for some reason it's not working, well, where's the point of failure? The more moving parts there are in a system and the more people that all have their own, ties out to the cloud, the likelier there is that there's a problem. I mean, heck, internet reliability, in North America, it's not 5 nines. It's not plain old telephone service. It's still, particularly as you get into different rural areas, it's still spotty, for a lot of folks. And so there are lots of opportunities for failure in there, depending on how the system is. And I really respect the people that are out there building systems and building products that they want to connect to their own cloud and they run it that way. But that can't be the single point of failure in a massive system that doesn't have scale, or you won't get the broad adoption into systems like what Lowe's or Staples or some of the other big players are bringing to market. It sounds great for the enthusiasts, but too much of this stuff is very rapidly becomes mission critical in the consumer's eyes. It's something they depend on when it's dark and they come home late at night.
We're on the last chapter. I'm going to accelerate it a little bit and just probably ask a couple questions off this because I want to get to some of the questions submitted from the audience. And by the nature of the topic, we've already kind of hit on some of the forward-looking stuff. But one of the things I want to ask is, I think we have people on the webinar today who are probably thinking about opportunities and how they can maybe create product. And I'd love for each of you to maybe talk about what are some of the unmet needs in this space. If you think about the consumer Internet of Things, if you think about the smart home, where is some white space where someone can innovate and maybe make a company or a product? I'll start with you, Kevin.
I think there's 2 areas. Frankly, you could look at any device and start looking at it and go and ask yourself, what value could I add to it if it was connected? And if I give you a very simple example of something we're bringing out in a couple of weeks' time, so it isn't something that you can rush out and do, but we have water leak detectors, and everybody's got water leak detectors, and everybody's coming out with water leak detectors. Well, that's great. So we've detected a water leak. Shut the damn water supply off. So find me a valve that will shut off the water supply as quickly as possible. And so we've gone to companies, we've gone to our vendors and said, hey, listen, guys, this is what we need. We need a connected water valve that will instantly react to these other things. So look at what's already out there. Look at every device. You'd be surprised at how many things would be their value would be greatly enhanced by connectivity. So that's one area. You can focus on devices, but the other piece to this is services. I have strong views about the challenges of every device manufacturer wanting their own cloud platform. I think that's kind of crazy, and that's going to cause a lot of tears over time. But actually, I think there's a huge number of opportunities around cloud services. So if we pull together a network of products for the home, and I can provide every device under the sun to you as a homeowner, all controllable through one user interface and one app, and I've got loads of data, how do I turn that data? How do I keep adding value to that data? How do I analyze your energy usage to give you good information and add to the value proposition? How do I analyze your gas and your water usage? How do I give you relevant information for your particular area? How do I look at ways in which I network you potentially with other homes? How do I take advantage of social and so forth? And those are things where cloud to cloud makes a ton of sense. There's no way, and I'm guessing Mike would support this, but I don't want to put words in his mouth. There's no way we're going to go off and build all of the services. We've built an engine. We've built something that will do the device bit. And what we want to do is layer over the top of it services. What services have you got? We've invested in companies a bit like Angie's List. We've invested in a company called Porch, where we can provide just about any serviceman, tradesman to you. So how do we layer all these things together to still add more value through that user interface and to that consumer?
Mike, what about you? What are some unmet opportunities? What are some potential areas that if you're thinking about creating a product, that when you look at the space, you're living and breathing every day, you see like, man, that's something that someone should make?
Yeah, I mean, you just walk around the house and you see opportunity around every corner. I mean, whether it's the pet area, which is an enormous market, but one that there's not a lot of choice as far as connectivity and solutions there that help bring awareness and management. It's literally across the board on the product side. Again, I agree with Kevin. There's services. There's tons of services that get layered in there. I still think as a market perspective, there's a huge unmet need for almost what I would call the general contractor for the connected home, where what you're looking for is someone who understands what's available and can advise consumers that aren't aware or would look to someone as that trusted advisor of how to go do it. And yeah, that exists in the CDA market, but that's oftentimes priced outside of the range of consumers. But really someone that can make all of this happen, because as soon as you look for a pure DIY solution, there's a significant segment of the population that's uncomfortable going with doing electrical work or doing plumbing work to put that water cutoff valve in, or HVAC work to go and replace even a thermostat as simple as people are trying to go make that. There's no one right type of installer, even among the biggest service providers, that can do all of that. So it really ends up being literally more of a general contractor saying, I'll take care of all of this for you and bring in the right tradesmen. A lot of what Lowe's is really taking a lead on to go bring that into the consumer, but do it in a way that's very, very affordable. That handyman service, and I know there are a number of folks that are looking at, but really specifically focused on education and awareness of the mass market products, not just trying to stick to the high-end products where there's a lot of margin.
I want to start delving a little bit into some of the questions. We've had a little bit of chat commentary, and I have some questions that were pre-submitted. One of the questions that has occurred during this call today is, what is your perspective on Internet of Things or smart home and its reliance on the cloud versus kind of just a pure play local connectivity? Clearly, some systems need to be architected to have local connectivity because oftentimes we know the power goes down. So, I mean, either one of you, is this something that you give a lot of thought to?
Yeah, I think. Sorry.
I think we both probably have a strong answer on that one.
Yeah,
Kevin, go ahead.
Mike, it'll be the same.
All right. Well,
go ahead, Mike.
I'll take it. Well, we are very strong believers in the hybrid approach. There's there are a ton of products that need the cloud, whether it's for processing or so on, to do their core functionality. But at the end of the day, they're also missing mission-critical functions, where I expect, no latency, very, very immediate control. When I push a button, a light switch, I expect the lights to go on, even if it's going across, 2 different wireless standards. That's something that, if my internet happens to be down just for 15 seconds, which happens all the time I still might expect my lights to come on. Now, when internet connectivity is reestablished, all that data is pushed back up to the cloud, it catches up, and all the heavy lifting when it comes from an analysis perspective happens in the cloud. And things that are less mission critical, maybe it's my sprinkler system, which is not nearly as time sensitive. That's fine. I can do a cloud integration there. It's not as meaningful or not as critical as something like life safety with smoke detectors or various other pieces. So for us, we're strong believers in a hybrid approach, but cloud only, at least today. I mean, maybe when we all have gigabit fiber and we're living in a super reliable world, it'll move there, but we're just not there yet.
The only thing I'd add to that is, look, the evidence is in the market already. There's a bunch of companies who came out with total cloud solutions, and that didn't work. And there's a bunch of companies who came out very product-centric. Everything was done in the home, and that didn't work. Mike is absolutely right. You need a hybrid. It's harder to do it that way, but it's got so much benefit. It's fundamental.
This question is actually directed at you, Kevin. When you think about this Internet of Things, it means a lot more than smart home. Someone asked, can we expect to see Lowe selling other things that are not traditional home systems, like cars, or connected car stuff, or wearables?
Whether we sell them is a point open for debate, but absolutely we will work with them. It comes back to this point about partnerships and broader ecosystems. The fact is, Lowe's specializes in one thing, that's your home. However, your home is just one thing in your life. When you're outside of the home, you're in your car, you're traveling, you're using your phone. There are things that we have already done and we will bring to market, and some of them are patently obvious. The idea of you driving away from your house and your car gets 400 yards away and your garage door is open, and your car will talk to you and tell you, hey, did you mean to do that? Well, do you want me to shut it for you? That type of thing, absolutely, every day of the week. We will be doing, and we will be partnering. Wearables, absolutely. Moving into health, into things that will potentially come into the home on a temporary basis, perhaps, to look after you. Absolutely, we'll get involved in those things. We recognize we are just a piece of an ecosystem, and it's important that the piece we take care of works with everything else.
I guess this could apply to either one. I'll direct it towards Mike. Do non-tech companies, brands, need to become Internet of Things companies?
Well, I think that, to keep up, literally every product category that we see has, someone finding a way to make it connected. And it's moving just from the high end, not away from just being high end, right? The original connected refrigerators everybody brought to market was had a screen in it. You could watch Netflix and various other things, and it's like, no, I'm sorry, I'm not watching a movie on the front of my refrigerator. But having that in an entry-level refrigerator that tells me I left my door open and that the freezer is going to defrost, that's incredibly valuable. And the prices are getting there where literally the entry-level products make a ton of sense to have connected. So I think everyone's going to have to find a way to do that. Now, the question is do they all need to be service providers themselves, provide that cloud service and do all of that? I think that's, to Kevin's point, I think that, that's beyond the scope of what I think a lot of these companies want or need to do, and certainly it's tough to monetize. So working in a system that allows them to go do that, makes a lot more sense. And so for us, we're obviously, we try to facilitate that a lot. We hear from a lot of device makers that come to us and say, hey, we want to be connected, we want to be part of your system, but we just don't have that capability. Can you help us? And that ends up being a role we play quite a bit, is helping people do that.
Yeah, we as a retailer do the exact same. You know, the reality is this: if there's anybody listening to this call that has a mains powered device, or frankly even a battery powered device, it's going to be connected. It's going to be IP connected in some way, because there's going to be some value proposition around it one way or the other. And if you don't do it, then somebody else will. And if that somebody else does it and comes and knocks on our door as a retailer, then that somebody else will probably get shelf space before you do. And that's the reality that's emerging.
We have some technical questions, and Mike, maybe you can take a step of this. Is the slow rollout of IPv6 hindering the rollout of Internet of Things?
Yeah, we haven't seen it. You know, I think, and you know, Kevin and I end up seeing each other all the time, and I think he made this statement. We make the same statement all the time. Everything needs to be connected to the internet, but it doesn't necessarily need to be connected directly. You know, I mean, that's what Wi-Fi routers do. You know, they do, you know, network address translation for me. You know, in effect, that's what Kevin's hub does. That's what our customers' hubs do, you know, as far as being able to get there. From a consumer, the consumer doesn't care if that specific device has its own unique IPv6 address, so much as it's accessible when I'm not inside my house, or you know, it can be controlled as in an environment with multiple devices together. So that's what we're seeing is it's really a don't care from a consumer perspective. Yes, would it make it easier to do some of the things that we do? Of course it would, just making it purely addressable, but it's certainly not a hindrance at this time.
I know in our conversations, Kevin, we've talked about Bluetooth before, and it's something I've been focusing on, and there's a question from John in the chat room basically saying, does Bluetooth LE ultimately eliminate Z-Wave and Zigbee? I'd love to hear either of your perspectives. I'll start with you, Kevin.
No. You know, I think, you know, I can give you a black and white answer to that, and there's not many things you can do that to. You know, the Bluetooth low energy, to try and get the range, to try and get the price points, to try and get the battery life and all those types of things, there'll always be a place for other wireless. I'd love to think that there's one wireless technology is going to dominate and solve everybody's problems, but it's been promised for so long that I'm bored listening to it. So I hope somebody comes up with something and somebody comes up with, you know, the perfect solution is low-powered Wi-Fi, because everybody's got Wi-Fi, haven't they? But you can't get the range, you can't get the battery life, and so on. So all those issues. Different devices need different technologies, or different technologies are the optimum solution for different devices, and so that's the challenge.
Just to add to that, I mean, one of the things that people talk about is they talk about the wireless and the RF aspect of it, and really I think the conversation needs to be the entire stack, from the lowest level, you know, wireless protocol and range-related issues, battery-operated issues. You know, clearly the benefit of Z-Wave and Zigbee there have the mesh network, so there's, you know, repeating built into the standard, and obviously there are a lot of people that are adding that to the Bluetooth standard going forward, although it's not all the way there yet. But where there's real value in a lot of these is when you move further up the stack and get to a common way of describing how do things like a thermostat operate. You know, that's where there's real value in something like the Z-Wave standard. Is for 10 years there's been a standard way where if you go right now and bring a brand new Z-Wave certified thermostat into either one of our systems, it's, even if we've never seen it before, it's going to work. Or if you look at something that's Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, it's the Wild West. Everybody's got their own APIs, they've got their own issues. Now, there are people that are going to try and solve that, whether it's the All Seeing Alliance and other folks along those ways, to add layers of protocols on top of layers of protocols. But, you know, Z-Wave has been out there. Zigbee is, with HA12, is finally catching up, where they really solve it from the top to the bottom, where you can get true interoperability that doesn't exist, you know, in any of these other standards yet.
Well, we're at the top of the hour, and I want to respect everyone's time, including the panelists as well as the people who are listening today. So I do want to thank everyone for participating. I want to thank Kevin as well as Mike. You guys have been great. I want to thank those who have attended and participated with some great questions. I'll follow up with some of the questions that have submitted and haven't been answered. I'll send them to the panel if there's like something, and I'll also answer some of them as well. So I appreciate you guys sending those in. For anyone who wants to find out more about either of Mike's businesses or Kevin's business, there are some URLs right there. You can also see the URL to NextMarket. Anyone who wants to listen to the next webinar, there's some details. Just go to that URL, and I'll also have more information on NextMarket for the next webinar for registration. Anyone who has questions about this or future webinars or what webinars you want to do or research, there's my email. Hey everyone, once again, thanks for listening. Kevin, Mike, you guys were great. Thanks, guys.
Our pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Mike.
Everyone, thanks for participating, and we'll talk to you on the next webinar. Thanks, guys.